And the question today, because we're about to embark on the saddest day for Jewish people, the day of Tisha B'Av, where a lot of bad things happened. We lost 2 temples on that day, and many other terrible things in history happened throughout our years. And basically the question is, when there's such a bad day, it's a day of mourning, it's a day of sadness. What can we see good in this day? Because basically what I took most away from the Shabbaton, from your lectures and from all your lectures, is that if you don't see the positive in everything, you're not looking at it the right way. So what about Tisha B'Av? What about when there's so much destruction and sadness? What kind of positive aspect can we find in this particular day?
Thank you for the report on the retreat. It was kind of special. I mean, what could be better than a group of Jewish women full-time immersed in learning and discussing, growing and practicing? What could be better? So there is a very big difference between sadness and grief. Grief, unfortunately, is a necessary part of life. It's the appropriate reaction to tragedy. If we couldn't grieve, we wouldn't be healthy. Sadness is not useful at all and is never justified, because sadness is more like quitting, giving up, feeling discouraged. That's never a positive thing. Grief motivates people. If something really bothers you and it really is uncomfortable and unacceptable, then we go ahead and we do something about it. So it's a strong motivator, and it's a symptom of life. Sadness is lifeless, and that's why it's never kosher. It never leads to anything, certainly nothing good. So we have to be careful. Tisha B'Av is a day of mourning and grief, not sadness. And the difference is significant. So we would check ourselves in the course of Tisha B'Av during the day. We would check ourselves to see, are you grieving or are you sad? Are you just sakrachen? Or are you really grieving something serious? And if you're not grieving, then knock it off. Don't walk around moping. So it's a serious fast day, and it's a long fast day because it starts the night before. In our case, Saturday night. It goes through Sunday night. So hopefully it'll be the last time we need to grieve anything, because we are promised that these days, the 3 weeks, the 9 days, the day of the 9th of Av itself, all these days will eventually become days of joy and happiness. Because, it always turns itself around. So the darker and the more dismal, the more joyful it will become.
Rabbi Friedman, would you said that, and you said it all along throughout the entire time we've been speaking, is that we do need to see positive even in the darkest places. Is there anything positive that we can see when there's grief? Can grief be for a positive purpose, for the good? Is there good in grieving? I mean, how can we turn grief around, or can it be turned around?
Can and it should. We're reading in the Torah portion of this week. Moshe is reviewing the 40 years, reminding the people of all the mistakes they made. And he says, before we were going to enter the land, you suggested that we send spies. And I thought that was a good idea, and I chose the best of you, the heads of the tribes. And you went and you came back and you gave a negative report. And the people said, it's because God hates us that he took us out of Egypt, so that we would now be slaughtered by the people in Canaan. And Moshe says, did you notice the 10 plagues in Egypt? Did you notice the miracles that God performed for you? Did you notice how he split the sea for you? Did you notice how he had you leave Egypt with an incredible wealth? Did you notice how he straightened the path for you so that you shouldn't even hurt your toes? And you say God hates you? It is so absurd that it's hard to explain. The people were not stupid people. How could they possibly claim that God hates them after all they saw? So Rashi says, really, they hated God. And that's called, in psychology, that's called transference. Because they hated God, it seemed to them that God probably hates them too. So they were really imposing their own feelings on God. But even that is so absurd. How could we be so mistaken? It's mind-boggling. And we spoke about this over the weekend. Every time we think it got so bad it can't get any worse, it always gets better. Throughout the Torah says, oh, and this, you did such a terrible, and God was so angry, it was so terrible, we had to start all over again. And start it all over again. No matter how bad it became, the next sentence, the next word is, so we started all over again. Nothing ever ends in negative. And that's what the Torah is telling us over and over. How do we understand it? Everybody was evil. Everybody. Everybody. Except for one man and his 3 sons. Out of the entire world, everybody was bad. And very bad. Without chance of tshuva. You would think, okay, it's all over. If it gets that bad, what's left? Call it off, cancel the world, and forget about it. No, Noach was cute. Noach found favor in God's eyes. So God said, come, let's start all over again. It's always positive. The punchline is always positive. You ever marvel that Cain kills Abel, and God starts a whole conversation with him? The first murderer in history kills his own brother. God has a conversation. Where is your brother? Am I my brother's keeper? Your brother's blood is very upset and he's crying. Well, does that mean that wherever I go, people will just kill me on the spot? God says, no, I'll make you a sign to protect you from people killing you. But you got to get your act together. Isn't that an amazing conversation? Unbelievable. So, on the one hand, you can say, it wasn't murder the way we think of murder. It was a different world back then. Life meant nothing. Live, die, who cared? So you can't look at it in the same way that we look at somebody who went to a school building and shot up a bunch of kids. It's not the same. Can't be the same. So God can't react the same way. Maybe God was feeling, I guess I didn't warn you about what happens when you hit people over the head too many times. You can actually kill them. I didn't make that very clear to you, did I? So,
Rabbi Friedman, but death is death. Why should it be treated differently under different circumstances? And who should it be treated differently by under different circumstances?
Death is death, but murder is not murder. Because, there's murder 1, and there's murder 2, and there's involuntary manslaughter, and there's crime of passion, and so murder is not so simple. Yeah, death is death. And even that, who knows? Back then, when life was brand new, hard to imagine. So we got to keep things in context. That's really very important. I think we spoke about this also. Yosef and his brothers, his father made him a coat. The brothers were jealous of him. No, you're not studying the story in context. These are the greatest, holiest people that ever lived. The heads of the tribes, Yehuda, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. We're not talking about imbeciles, grown men who are ready to kill their brother over a coat. It's not in context. If you think that that's what you're reading, it's not in context. You think you're reading about the guy next door? You're reading about the holiest of the holy people. So, keeping it in context, try to understand what exactly is going on there. So, concerning turning grief into positivity. So the first thing is, grief is not negative to begin with. Negative is lifeless. Whatever is lifeless is negative. Every sign of life is a positive. Might not be the best, the preferred, but if it's alive, then it's positive. We prefer a sweet positive over a bitter positive. But as long as it is alive, even if it's a bitter pill, it can certainly be transformed, because life is already good and it's already life-giving, so you can extract the life from it. So, for example, if a loss of life is very grievous, it means that life is very precious. You know, it's always balanced. To the degree that you love life, to that degree you grieve over loss of life. So when you're grieving over loss of life, in a sense, you are celebrating life. Because if you didn't object to the loss of life, then your commitment to life is not that intense. So just the fact that we are told to grieve the loss of the temple, do we really today, you know anybody who's really upset? Oy, the temple, I need the temple, I miss the temple. I don't know anybody like that. I'm sure there are such people, but I haven't met them yet. So what are we grieving? What are we? Okay, it's an obligation. So you act like you're grieving, is that what it is? You make believe you're upset. No. The loss of the temple means a loss of godliness. It means that the unholy overwhelmed the holy. The darkness was stronger than the light. That's not an ancient, bygone event. It's happening all the time. Those were the particularly upsetting and inexplicable. How does something that holy can be destroyed by meaningless, evil people who have no purpose and no... Why is it that way? Why can stupidity overwhelm brilliance? Why can darkness overwhelm light? Why can bitterness turn even sweetness sour? That we grieve. And that's upsetting. That's upsetting. I mean, you talk to people today, they're so confused about everything, about their own identity, about their own gender, about their own body. Who did this? What evil, what stupidity has such a power to make complete morons out of intelligent people? What is going on? And parents don't take their kids out of public schools. What is that? They're intelligent, responsible parents in every other way. I can't believe this. Stupidity still has so much power. We're so close to Mashiach already, and still? That's grievous. That's something we deeply regret, because that's not right. That shouldn't be. Shouldn't be. So, well, people believe that everybody has their choice and dysphoria, blah, blah, blah. What is that? All of a sudden, you're not making sense. You're saying God hates you when all the evidence shows that God loves you. What is wrong with you? Where has your head gone? It's very scary. Where are the responsible parents?
Rabbi
There should
Friedman,
not be a single child left in a public school.
those are all really good questions and good points. So my question would still go back. Where is the positive in all of this? Is there a positive in everything that's going on?
Are people really going to remain so blind? We're going to have an entire generation of massacred kids? It can't be. So really what's happening is, what would you say was the biggest passion, the biggest sin that people for the longest time were victims to? I think without any question, sexual passion. It was completely out of control. Sometimes it led to violence. But the sexual passion was out of control. Every possibility, every opportunity, every temptation, it was just everywhere all the time. You couldn't get away from it. Well, it seems like when you overindulge any passion, any pleasure, it loses its pleasure. This is what's happened to our society. The sexual pleasure is no longer pleasurable. It's lost its appeal. It's lost its power. So people went from heterosexual to maybe we should try some homosexual. That went for about 20 years. Now that's boring. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody's interested anymore. Instead of being the ultimate temptation and pleasure, it has become a burden. So now people are thinking, if I'm not heterosexual and I'm not homosexual, what in the world am I? Well, we don't know. We're run out of ideas. But really what's happening is not dysphoria, not people hate their bodies. And it's the only explanation for why I have no sexual excitement. So here's an opportunity to reinvent sexuality, because we messed it up. We ruined it, we destroyed it, we killed it. We need to reinvent it. We need to rediscover what intimacy is. We need to bring back the intimacy. We need to find the noble, dignified, awesome form of sexuality that it is meant to be, not some kind of game. This could transform our lives from one extreme to another. Teenagers are the first ones to understand this and appreciate this. They're still healthy enough, and they're just mature enough to understand the problem and want to fix it. So here's what we're dealing with. Time to reinvent sex itself, because it has gone sour.